Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Milestone. Milestone is about a truck driver in India named Galib who's caught in the middle of a labor dispute, as a bunch of laborers who are normally responsible for loading up his truck before he takes off end up going on strike at the company that he works at, so it's up to Galib to pick up the slack where they left off. Galib, however, is one of the older employees who works at the company, so he finds himself physically unable to carry out some duties related to his job, and there comes a point in the movie where he thinks he's going to be replaced altogether, as he ends up being responsible for training a new employee at the company named Posh. At the same time, he also happens to be mourning the loss of his wife, who dies shortly before this movie takes place, and he finds himself undergoing an existential crisis of sorts throughout the film at the same time that everything else at his truck company is going on. So there's just all kinds of heavy subject matter that's covered right from the outset. There are a bunch of supporting characters that follow along with Galib's journey throughout the story, but for all intents and purposes, he's the main star of the show, and he's the one that I'm going to be spending the most attention talking about in this review. He's played by Suvinder Vicky, who I believe is a famous character actor in India, and watching him perform in this movie, I completely understand how he got his reputation. He doesn't really add a lot of emotional range to the character, he doesn't really show much in the way of emotion as the story takes place, but what he lacks in that, he definitely makes up for in sheer presence alone. There's a lot of scenes in this movie where Galib is just sitting to himself not saying anything, and they go on for minutes on end as he's often either meditating on something that happened in the past or he's ruminating on his current circumstances. And while these scenes may be lacking in the dialogue department, the expressions on the actor's face tell exactly what you need to know story-wise. You can tell what's going on in his mind just by looking at him, and that is masterful storytelling. Galib really comes across as a deeply miserable man having to deal with both the loss of his wife and the potential loss of his job, yet despite all of his troubles that continue to affect him, he remains dedicated to his job because, in his words, it's all that he has identity-wise. This is a thing that I think everyone can relate to in their personal lives, not just Indians, but everyone in general. I think everyone at some point in their life has found themselves being miserable about the circumstances that have been dealt to them and wish that they had something better to look forward to. And it's made even worse by the fact that a lot of people, myself included on occasion, tend to identify themselves with whatever job they happen to be working in. And if they happen to lose that job, then what else do they have left to call themselves? Of course, the themes of aging and obsolescence go hand in hand with Galib's predicament, chief among them being the fact that this movie is called Milestone. Usually when we hear the word milestone, there's a positive connotation that's attached to it, like if you were married to someone for 50 years or if you lost 200 pounds, those are incredible milestones worth celebrating, but as far as Galib is concerned, his milestone is not a good thing at all. Right at the beginning of the movie, it's noted that Galib's truck has logged in over 500,000 kilometers of mileage in it, and all of his fellow co-workers are celebrating the fact that he's reached such a big milestone, and no one else has ever done that before, but Galib just feels completely ambivalent about the whole thing. At first glance, you can look at the mileage of that truck as an example of Galib's dedication to his job as a truck driver for the company that he works for, but when you really think about it, it makes you wonder why the company is using a truck that old and beat down to begin with. Anyone who knows anything about vehicles knows that driving one that has over 500,000 kilometers on it isn't really a good idea. And that kind of situation is directly comparable to that of Galib's in the sense that he's old and run down and has a lot of his own mileage racked up too. He knows deep down that it's only a matter of time before he loses his job and someone younger than him takes his place, yet he desperately tries to hold on to that job because it's the only part of his identity that he feels he has left. The whole inevitability of time, from Galib's time coming to an end at his job to his wife's untimely passing, it all just made for great thematic material. I thought that this movie's central theme was executed amazingly well. Like I said, there are other characters that reflect the themes that are associated with Galib's journey in this movie as well, and I won't talk about all of them in this review, but one that I would like to talk about is Posh. Posh is the complete opposite of Galib in terms of personality. He's not disenchanted in any way, shape, or form, and he's completely new to the job, unlike Galib, who has all kinds of experience behind him. Posh takes note of Galib's experience as a truck driver and looks up to him as a role model of sorts, which Galib's boss ends up noticing and ends up putting them on a lot of supply runs together. I think some of the scenes where Galib and Posh are talking on their supply runs together are some of the best scenes in the whole movie, because no matter whatever topic it is they're talking about, they end up having completely different perspectives from each other at the topic at hand. Posh is naturally a lot more optimistic due to his younger age, and he looks forward to having a bright future with the company that he's working at, whereas Galib is a lot more pessimistic and he's just trying desperately to make it to his next paycheck. There's one moment where Posh can't help but idolize Galib for the supply runs that he's made to Kuwait. Apparently he's famous for that, and Galib just completely hand waves the whole thing off like it's not a big deal. I just thought Posh was an excellent foil for Galib. He served as a constant reminder of his own mortality, as well as a great unintentional antagonist of sorts. Something else I noticed while watching this movie was that it was very realistic just in how everything was portrayed, sometimes to a fault. One of the best things I can highlight about this movie's presentation in this regard is just how decrepit and rusty everything is in Galib's environment. There's lots of old, broken down vehicles at the truck yard where Galib works at, lots of overturned, destroyed concrete structures that dot the landscape where he lives. It all just added to the visual aesthetic of this movie's theme, and it serves as a reminder that nothing, no matter how impressive, lasts forever. The lack of a soundtrack present in this movie is something else I noticed as well when it came to the whole realism vibe it was going for, and honestly, I'm kind of a bit mixed on it. On one hand, the lack of music did help me pay attention better to whatever dialogue was being discussed on screen, but on the other hand, I do wish that there was some music playing in the background just to add to whatever atmosphere was being conveyed. The only problem that I had with this movie is that it didn't really dwell all that much on the passing of Galib's wife. It only talked about it in like 2 or 3 scenes, and then the rest of the movie is focused on his job. And after the few times where his wife is talked about or discussed, I found myself leaving those scenes with more questions than answers. I don't know, I just felt like the wife was kind of an afterthought in this movie compared to all the long takes that are present in this movie, which I can't believe it's taken me this long to talk about. There are so many scenes in this movie that go on for like 3 or 4 minutes at a time. While I think it's technically impressive that the filmmakers were able to put so many of these long takes in the movie and that the actors were able to maintain composure throughout, I think the movie would have been better off if they shaved a few minutes off from each long take and dedicated to talking about something related to the wife. Overall, Milestone is a great slow burn drama, though it's not a happy movie by any means, and for that reason, combined with the fact that there are a lot of slow scenes spread throughout, it won't be everyone's cup of tea. But if you're in the mood for an excellent character study and you don't mind the lack of soundtrack as well as all the scenes that feel like they go on forever, I think you would love this movie. While I do wish that there were a few more details added in parts to this movie's story, I was completely invested in Galib's journey from beginning to end, and the overall execution of this movie's central theme is nothing short of masterful. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Milestone. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the French thriller Oxygen. Bye bye!